Welcome to the session on halal brands. This session will explore opportunities to develop global halal brands. Despite the tremendous growth in the Islamic economy, there exists no truly global halal brands today. So this session will explore ideas and opportunities to develop such brands. To moderate this session, I'd like to introduce someone who has spearheaded research that has helped define the Islamic economy. So I'd like to introduce my colleague and CEO of Dinar Standard, Rafiuddin Shaiko.
Thank you, Haroon. I begin in the name of God, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and with the greeting of Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May peace and blessings be upon all of you. My name is Rafiuddin Shaiko. I'm the Managing Director of the Research and Advisory firm Dinar Standard. This is going to hopefully be a fun and exciting session because it's about brands, and brands are about color and in engaging audiences, and so I'm very excited about the panel we have, and I think it's going to be a great discussion, and inshallah we're going to also get enough time for you to ask questions, so keep your questions ready because we'll get to it quickly. Before we get and start with my distinguished panelists, I just want to set the stage. In the last 40 to 50 years, Interbrand, which is a global firm that tracks the top brands on the world, Apple, Google, GE, etc., has been doing a ranking of top 100 global brands. How many brands from the Islamic countries, forget halal brands, forget modest fashion or Muslim travel brand. Just brands from any of the Islamic countries, Turkey, Malaysia, UAE, Saudi Arabia. How many brands do you think ever made it to that list in the history of them doing the ranking? 3? Okay, anyone else? 5. Can you tell me one of the names? Okay, sir. 0. Okay. One more. Which one? Okay. Perhaps an aspiring brand. The answer is 0. There has not been one global brand from any of the Islamic economies, ladies and gentlemen. It has yet to make it to Interbrand. Emirates today, my firm has done the top ranking of brands from the Islamic economies, and Emirates indeed is the number 1. Some of the other brands from the Islamic economies are Ulker from Turkey, Vestel, Indofood from Indonesia, but none of these even make it to top 100 global brands. There's another ranking by Brown Ward Millard. None of the Islamic economy brands make it. Fortune 500.
Not yet.
Fortune 500. So forget 100, 500. How many companies from Islamic countries, not even brands, just companies, on the Fortune 500 ranking? Anyone? 3. I think Petronas, Sabic, and Coach, which is from Turkey. And the first 2 are actually not even consumer brands. So, okay, enough of the context. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here because we have this emerging halal economy, developing Islamic economy around halal food, modest fashion, Muslim-friendly travel. And this itself is a big market, right? I mean, if we think of the Muslim or this values-driven market itself, it's a pretty big market. We still don't have a region-wide brand in any of these categories. You cannot, today, the most popular clothing brand in the Islamic countries is H&M or Zara, right? Why can't we have a modest fashion brand become one of those things? So that is basically the topic that we have. We have a very good mix of panelists. We have a gentleman with Mudassir and the Kareem, the brand of Kareem, which has become successfully a regional brand, so we're going to get that perspective. Vilma is going to show us a very exciting project within Dubai, how it's enabling Dubai as a destination brand, turning local artists become global brands or regional brands, so that's going to be a very fascinating perspective. Cindy is going to talk to us about Capsters, which is a modest fashion sportswear brand and a very fascinating story that we're going to learn about. So what I'd like to do is, Vilma, if you could start off and just give our audience a 2-minute introduction about your project and the project you work with, and then we'll go around, and then we'll start with the questions.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. I think I would like to actually start with a question, because this is how Al Circle Avenue's story began, is we had to ask, how come industrial areas across the world have become the leading art hubs that build creative economies for the art capitals like New York, London, across the world? How do we get there? How do they start? And really we had to look at the industrial areas that artists are the first ones to start the movement of creation. Then you have art galleries that join kind of the layer. You have fashion that follows, culinary experience, and before you realize, it has set the foundation for creative economy that really shaped the identity of a city itself. And these areas are known across the world. You have New York, you have Meatpacking District in New York, you have Shoreditch in London, you have Gilman Barracks in Singapore, and in today's Dubai, you have Al Circle Avenue, which is a part of Al Quoz, and is driven by an Emirati philanthropist family, Al Circle. And so ultimately what I will speak about is, what does it take to create a cultural destination, and how do you create a space where culture is produced and consumed? Thank you.
Great, thank you, Vilma.
So I hope all of you used Kareem to get to this event, or at least we'll use it to go back. We are MENA's largest car booking service today. And the story of Kareem basically started 3 years ago, when me and Magnus Olsson, who's the co-founder of Kareem, we were consultants that were traveling the region. And when you travel the region for business, you use flights, hotels, and cars. And flights and hotels were quite all right. The service was fine, it was consistent, the quality was okay, and things were reliable. But when it came to cars, things were quite ad hoc and unreliable. Sometimes there would be no one to pick us up when we land in Riyadh. Other times the car would show up, but the driver, who we now call captains, they would not know where to go. Then you would have to figure out how to pay them in the local currency, and off the list goes. So it was a pretty painful experience as a business traveler that was going around and serving the region. So when we started, we said, let's try to find a solution to the problem. And for the first year of Kareem, this is what we did. We went to all the companies that we thought were traveling, had people traveling, and we tried to give them an easy way to book service or book car services and to get a reliable service. So the car would show up 99.8% of the time. The person that's coming to pick you up would know how to get you to the destination that you want to get to. So reliability was a core promise at the beginning. So that's what we did for the first year, and then as the whole global economy and the hype around app-based car services started, we then launched our own app. We started focusing on the consumer segment, and now we are in 18 cities, all the way from Morocco to Lahore in Pakistan. And we're doing tens of thousands of bookings a day. We are working with about 10,000 captains in this region. And what's really exciting for us, in addition to seeing the growth that we are seeing, is the fact that we feel we are an instrument in making people's lives easier in the region. You know, a lot of us who came to this region from other parts of the world realize that simple things are painful here. And there's a lot of friction in these societies that leads to loss of productivity and loss of ambition to do big things, because we get stuck in a lot of small things that take a ton of time. So what we are hoping to do is to make people's lives simpler, starting with transportation and hopefully going on to other things, and build an organization that inspires. Because a lot of the reasons why, as Rafi said, global brands have not come out of the region is because a lot of our organizations are not set up the right way to scale and to build and to give people the right environment to succeed. So we are hoping in the way that we build this organization, the way that we do customer service, the way that people are treated within Kareem, is hopefully an inspiration for others to follow suit and becomes a change for the region. So inshallah, the ambition is to simplify lives and inspire, and we're starting with transportation as the first step.
Great. Thank you, Mudassir. Cindy, if you would introduce us to Capsters.
I'm Cindy van den Bremen. I'm the designer of Capsters, sporty hijabs. We're the world-leading brand in sport hijabs. We're empowering women through sports worldwide. We do that with a lot of integrity and sincerity. We listen to the needs of these women for fashionable alternatives, comfortable, breathable sport hijabs compared to the traditional hijab. You don't need pins, you don't need knots, you don't need an undercover. And the remarkable story is actually that I graduated on this matter 16 years ago. So I was the inventor of the sport hijabs. There was no market there. There was a need, but there was no product yet. There was a Dutch girl expelled from gym class because of her hijab that the teacher didn't think was safe. And this led to a court case. Her mother tried to sew the hijab together, and even in the court case, a rollover was done by this girl to show that it was not hazardous. Nevertheless, for the first time in the Netherlands, because there were other hijab cases, and it was always that the hijab was not to be prohibited, and this time it was prohibited due to safety reasons. And as an alternative, it was said the girls could wear a swimming cap and a turtleneck instead, because that would cover the same areas. I started laughing when I read that. And at the same time, I felt my duty as a designer was to solve this matter and to not only look at it from a safety perspective, but also from an identity perspective and the needs from this girl. So for half a year, I did research. I worked with a lot of women in the Netherlands. I visited them, both in the communities, but also individually. And I've been working on the design since then in a similar way. So I co-design with my users. We have wonderful role models. One of them is actually in the audience, in the front row, Aida Otman from Dubai. And they give us wonderful feedback to improve the design.
Would you like her to demo or showcase?
Maybe later on we can ask her about her experience. And I'm on stage, but she's actually my hero because she runs marathons, ultra marathons worldwide. In 2 weeks, she's going to be running in Amsterdam. And she organized the 7 Emirates run. And it's through people like this, through women like this, who are really identifying our brand and exposing the values of Capsters.
Thank you, Cindy. So I'll just start with a set of questions for each of you, and then I'll open it up for the audience. And Cindy, I'll start with you, because you're the most sort of closest to the topic of this summit, which is the quote-unquote the Muslim lifestyle market. And with your brand, the sport, this sporting hijab, what are some of the challenges? Because in the case of food, it's very clear the regulations or guidelines developing. In the case of finance, the same. In the case of clothing, to become a regional or a brand that can be successful across geographies, you have to deal with the variety of needs and interpretations and requirements. So how are you addressing that? And where are you geographically? How many markets are you actually locally present?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, like I told you, I started actually with this single case of this individual girl, and I really thought, I'm an idealist. I'm not a commercial-driven person. So I really thought I would solve her problem and her case. And when I graduated, I had a lot of publicity, and I was invited to write an article, and it was with my Hotmail address, it was published. And all these orders started coming in. And I remember one comment from a girl in America. She said, wearing your hijab, I can show I'm willing to integrate, but within my own norms and values. And that's exactly my intention, what I did when I was designing it. So there was a big challenge of getting it out there. So I approached the bigger brands because I wasn't in there for the brand, I was in there for the solution. Well, to make a long story short, 2 years later, I launched the brand Capsters. This was in 2001. And this was in an age where there was no web shop online market yet. So I had this web shop, and you would email me, and I would email back, thank you for the interest, what color would you like? So it was very low profile. Now I have a Capsters Limited, together with my business partner, who's also sitting front row, and we're actually delivering worldwide through capsters.com. We have resellers in over 12 countries. And what's interesting is that most of our resellers, and actually one of them is in the audience, I don't know where Karim went, he already left. Karim is from Turkey. He's in the session of fashion. He also sells our brand. But what's interesting about most of our resellers are women like Aida Otman, becoming a fan of Capsters, wearing the Capsters at sport events, being approached by these women who are in need and don't know about the alternatives to a traditional hijab in sports, and realizing that they can reach the market in a better way than us. They can locally, in their own valuta and their own language, approach these women. And we have perfect examples of this in Malaysia, in Singapore, in Brunei, and now even in Australia. So I think what's interesting also when you're talking about a fragmented market is that for us, zooming in on one person, discovering a niche market, being a universal brand, addressing universal needs, and then again focusing on fragmented areas. And I think the biggest challenge, and I think that's also dealing with other brands, is that you deal with local factors such as culture, such as traditions, interpretations, because if you look in the audience, the way hijabs are worn here, some show a little hair, some don't show hair at all, some use a little, I call it a sunroof. So there's different interpretations. How do you design for that? How do you listen carefully to all these needs and still having this unity and this universal brand?
How would you, how do you address because hijab ultimately is a not just a culture but a religion-driven consideration. So as I said, in food, very clear. There's scholars and they have guidelines and so forth. In the case of fashion, there aren't. But did you have to consider, because when you said it's a empowering tool and it's a consideration in terms of social impact, did you have to consider some of the scholarly inputs, or how have you kind of?
Well, I felt very insecure, being honest. I was a student still approaching this very sensitive subject. Think about 16 years ago. This is pre-9/11. I don't know if many of you have been to the West or come from the West and know the sensitivity in this subject. So am I allowed as a non-Muslim? My husband is Muslim, but I'm not a Muslim. Am I allowed to touch upon this matter? And am I allowed to really redesign the headscarf? So that's why I think for me as a designer, integrity is the biggest key. And people noticed my sincerity. And actually that's why we just discussed this with Karen this morning, that it's so amazing that almost every week we get emails, personal emails from women thanking us for what we did and enabling them to participate in sports.
Sure. No, thank you. Of course, all multinationals and global brands, they're all catering to Muslim consumers. So I don't think it's a question of who can or who cannot, but if you had to consider certain kind of guidelines or not, and you're saying you use the input from the need that you saw, and then you based it on it.
We still do that today. For me, I'm a co-designer. I cannot design in another way than with the people I design for. And for me, internet or Facebook is the co-design tool, because I pose a question and I get feedback. And also we send out cards with the orders asking them, we value your feedback, please give it back to us so we can improve it.
Thank you. I think it's an amazing, and as you said, starting that long ago and being able to serve that need. Mudassir, coming to Karim, you are a homegrown brand, starting with my original gripe about we don't have any brands coming from the region. So, mashallah, you've turned into a regional brand. You're all the way, as you said, from Morocco. As I understand, 18 cities. 18 cities now. So, can you share with the audience what have been the key, if you would say from a marketing and branding point of view, what were the key things that enabled this so far?
Yeah. So I think, look, if you want to create a global brand, or at least even a regional brand that can compete with global brands, which is the case here to some extent, I think you need to have a world-class service, in our space is a service industry, right? So I cannot go and buy the best plant in the world and deliver the best product. And service is a function of people. If we can attract world-class people, then we have a chance of making a world-class service. If we cannot, then it's not going to happen. And I think for us, being in Dubai has been a blessing, because Dubai is able to attract world-class talent. There are people here who are amazingly talented. And even if you find people that are talented in other parts of the world, you have the ability to attract them to Dubai. Because the rest of the region, let's admit it, right? There is a brain drain that's happening from this region to other parts of the world. And then you're not left with people who can create a world-class service. So I think the emergence of Dubai as a global destination, as an attractive destination to build your life, your family here, has helped us tremendously. So the first challenge for us was just attracting the right people to come on board. And we have done some creative things along the way as well, where we were not able to attract talent. Like, for example, Saudi is a very challenging place for talent. We actually made an acquisition to acquire a Jeddah-based company called Enwani, and that was our way of getting the right talent on board. We've done a similar acquisition in Morocco to get the right talent on board. So for us, talent is key, and if we can attract the right talent, then we have a shot at becoming world-class. The second thing that, and we just had a discussion on the side as well, is how do you get the best out of this talent, right? How do you keep them motivated? How do you give them the intellectual freedom to take risks and make things happen? So we've tried very hard, and we continue to try hard to create the right culture and incentives for people within the organization. So for example, one thing that is a simple thing but goes a long way is that everyone in Kareem, including the person that picks up your phone, has stock options. So, he's an owner in the business for all practical purposes. And as Kareem does well, that person who's picking up the phone for you is also doing well. And it just drives an amazing amount of ownership that you need to build these world-class brands. So that's the second thing that we are constantly striving to do. Let's figure out what the missing pieces are and make people owners, make people entrepreneurs within Kareem to actually drive the next set of growth. And lastly, for a brand like Kareem, which the business that we are in requires a ton of scale to break even, let alone make money. So, technology businesses in general, you need a lot of funding to make the journey happen and become big. Our competitor has raised billions of dollars. Now, fortunately, the
Uber.
region. Huh?
If I can call the name Uber.
Yeah, Uber, right. I try to avoid their name, of course. But you need money to scale these businesses and become world-class. Now, fortunately for us, we are in a region that is a net exporter of capital. This region invests money in the rest of the world. So I think if you can build a credible story, if you can build a track record and demonstrate that you can do it, money is there. So for us, getting the right talent, creating an environment that thrives the right talent to function and become world-class, and then showing that track record to investors regionally and getting their support was the one that led this thing to happen.
Great, thank you. And I think for the aspiring young entrepreneurs, I think a very important point to note, as you've highlighted, is, generally when people think about marketing and branding and I want to create a brand, they're thinking about logos and, how does it look and feel and design and all of that. But the most important thing you highlighted is people, talent. Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with you. And I think because that enables you to deliver world-class service, which enables you to become a competitive brand. So very insightful, thank you. Vilma, Dubai is a destination brand. It's becoming a global brand. As a destination, it is a global brand. Dubai is now the top destination in terms of tourism, in terms of the Dubai airport as having the highest number of international tourist traffic, etc. How is Al Circal playing a role, you think, in adding to this brand destination? And how is it contributing to developing local talent to become brands themselves?
Well, I think the second part of your question actually really sums up what Al Circal Avenue is. And it's interesting because when I have these conversations with so many friends or colleagues, I hear all the time that Dubai has no arts and culture. That is usually the feedback I receive. And someone that works in arts and culture, of course, I give them a long answer. And it's just interesting because you have so many homegrown brands. Galleries that started 7 years ago were all homegrown. Today are the only ones to participate at major international fairs like FRIES, Basel, FIAC. They made history. They formed milestones. They were the first ones to ever pioneer a way for regional artists into international acclaim. And the same gallery programs and the same artists today exhibit, and they're part of the most prominent collections such as Tate, MoMA, Whitney Museum, New Museum, and others. And I think just this year, an artist, Monir Fermanian, I always struggle to pronounce her last name, was the first Iranian artist to hold a retrospective, solo retrospective at Guggenheim, New York. So the history is being made, the history is being written by homegrown galleries, and the kind of second stage we are entering, then we built the expansion financed by El Circle family, was that now we have first international galleries that want to join Middle Eastern art scene. That never happened before. So you have a gallery like Leila Heller Gallery from New York that's been in New York for 30 years, opening a space in El Circle Avenue in a month from today for the first time in the history. Same with Cousteau Gallery, Jean-Paul Najar Foundation that originated in Paris. And so what that does, it strengthens the overall ecosystem and infrastructure for the arts. And I think we are contributing now to shaping the identity of the city. Like you mentioned, that is a part of Dubai's identity, but I think also the positioning globally. And then the last element was, then we announced the expansion and we grew together with the art scene of Dubai, was we had to ask ourselves, how do we create a destination, but also how can we help the art scene develop just a little more? And so how can we foster artistic practice? How can we encourage artists to stay in Dubai and actually produce work locally? And so we have Al-Seed, who's actually giving a talk, I think, at another panel at the moment, who will be opening a space in El Circle Avenue as well as a part of the expansion. But what surprised us, just going back to your point, Rafi, earlier, when you said there is such kind of limited offer in terms of creative talent still in the region. But when we announced the expansion, which was 2 years ago, we had 50 spaces, and don't forget, we are building them in the middle of industrial areas, so it's not like it's a very high demanded area. We received over 400 submissions, and we met 200 of those entrepreneurs, and the level of proposition, the way they're challenging existing models and reinventing industries was fascinating, and this is all homegrown talent. And so I think that was a very kind of exciting new platform, because that led into initiatives like First Art Cinema, Black Box Theater, community-led initiatives that will open in El Circle Avenue this fall. Will start in November, and then it will continue till March of next year. But I think we are forming the creative economy, and collaboration is key. And just to kind of sum up, today UAE has become the cultural capital for the region, because you have Abu Dhabi, where the biggest institutions, I mean, Louvre and Guggenheim will be opening their doors. You have Dubai that already serves as a commercial arts hub. And then Sharjah that has a fantastic program. I mean, Sharjah Foundation has over almost 20 museums, I believe. As well as started Sharjah Biennial, one of the top 10 biennials recognized in the world. And so I think all of us have these distinct core competences that through collaboration shape the UAE as the capital, not only for the region, but soon internationally. So that's kind of hope it answers your question.
Indeed, I'm very excited and looking forward to actually coming to the Avenue, and I think anyone who hasn't, I'm sure they should as well. And indeed, creativity and art plays such an important role in just business thinking and design thinking. I know you didn't want me to touch too much on it, but it is a big contributor to inspiring and, opening minds and so forth. Cindy, you wanted to add something? And at this point, I will start taking questions. So, but Cindy, why don't you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to get into your, because Capsus was in the Sharjah Museum as well, and we won a Good Design Award, and we're part of the permanent collection of MoMA. What I think is interesting in regards to your question on marketing, what I find triggering is what a lot of companies think is marketing is rather a sauce over a product, the outside. And I think this is the value of design, the design thinking, that it needs to be done within the context with the people. And I think that's the added value of design in building brands.
Absolutely. Sir, if you could state your name, your affiliated organization, please just ask it as a question, no comments.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Assalamu alaikum. Shabir Razvi from International Finance Solutions in London. My question, especially, you talked about 9/11 and sort of coming from London. The word Islamic, living in the West, in itself has become a toxic brand. How do we get over the definition of calling things Islamic, but sort of mitigating the toxicity that is associated with being Islamic?
If I can just, sure, if someone else would like to comment, but I think this project in itself, I can tell you, is a testament to how we're changing the perception of Islamic.
Yeah, can I?
Right. Even, sure, but I'll let the panelists first respond.
A very interesting question, because actually a lot of our customers, our clients, our fans are living in the diaspora, and they deal with this toxicity that you're referring to. What we're trying to do as a brand, and that is actually my passion and my driven to prevent prejudice, is to showcase these stories of Aida Othman, and therefore creating sincerity in our brand. And so what we're doing in social media is not only promoting our products and our price, but we're actually showcasing these women that are empowering the world and making them more visible. And we're doing that together, for example, with an organization called Shirzanan Global. And they're portraying women actively being athletes, with and without a hijab, to put more spotlight on them, because they are almost invisible. But what they do, they have a very important role in the diaspora and in the West, because they actually show the contradictory of the perception of the veil as being oppressive, just like the girl from Muslim Girl, and that's showcased yesterday on the stage, that it is time for a new perspective on Muslim society in the diaspora.
Sure. And one of the things, as Cindy is saying, even in the US, we have brands where the word halal is now, in fact, becoming mainstream and accepted. If you go to New York City, you cannot avoid a halal stand, and it's actually the best value for food in Manhattan today, and all these halal stands. So, and we are seeing premium brands. We have a brand like Saffron Road in the US, which is the most popular organic food brand, which happens to be halal. So, if I can refer to our prophet, beloved prophet, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he espoused what business was. So I think, in a way, I think this Islamic economy, if it's smart, it lives by its values rather than the labels. That's what the Prophet ﷺ did. If our products, the way we do business, and we're starting to see those great success stories. And I think, maybe business will change that perception, perhaps, inshallah. So, any other question? We had a gentleman back there. I'll take one from here.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ahmed Sadiq. I'm from the Halal Trust certifying body in South Africa, Cape Town. I have just a double-edged type of a question, but I just want to quote the previous speaker, just as a response also to this one. He said there's we have to change the mindset from global products for the Islamic world to the mindset of Islamic products for the global world. Now my question is basically, I like the idea of homegrown products, or things that we produce, in our own country. But my one question is, why is it so expensive? If these products, because you are saying you're promoting the Islamic or the whatever in terms of Islam? And then the second question is, how do we control it? Because even those homegrown products, and you can go into the market here, I'm sure in Dubai, even in any other country, especially in the Gulf states, you find all of them, the very exact same products at a cheaper price, China made, not Dubai made. Thank you.
If I may jump in
Please.
into that one, thank you for your question. And I think that's the same question we asked ourselves. But the infrastructure for creative economy is still in development stages. I mean, specifically within arts and culture or in general creative. And I think as Al Circle Avenue, what we had to do is to take a risk on the new initiatives and new entrepreneurs and really help them to actually be incubated in our spaces so they actually have an opportunity to open those businesses. Because in a lot of cases, these are just ideas, and the infrastructure is still, in terms of legislation, in terms of costs, in terms of overheads, is very expensive. And so, of course, the ultimate service or product is at a much higher cost because they're unable to keep up at the same level as bigger companies. And that's the same in fashion. I mean, then you're a big designer and your production is in massive numbers, it's very easy to produce. Young designers struggle in Dubai because they have very limited numbers in their production, especially at the beginning. And so I think the idea is how through collaboration and through new initiatives we can actually support homegrown talents, support homegrown businesses. That's the question we asked in Al Circle Avenue, and so we created a specific model to actually help some of those organizations and new ideas. And a lot of them, inshallah, will be opening now in fall. But that is because Al Circle family took that kind of lead as a philanthropist to invest into creative economy development. But I mean, that is, I think, always a struggle, then it's an emerging market still, or the infrastructure is developing.
Sir, would you like to add something to that? Or?
No, I think as Wilma said, two things, right? Economies of scale, and the second is just they're early in their development. So it will take time for these things to become more efficient over time. But we need to keep investing if we want to see them build scale and become efficient.
I'll take some questions from here, back there. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Nida. I'm an Islamic finance student. Basically, there is creative talent and everything in the region and the Islamic economy. But becoming a global brand requires investment, money. What is it that makes this region a net exporter of capital into non-Islamic brands and making them a global brand instead of homegrown companies and taking them from an entrepreneur to a bigger venture and a global brand, and that.
So you're saying what
do these financiers and what do these investors look for in
Right. I mean, I don't know if we have the right panel, but perhaps because you've gone through some financing, each one of you have dealt with financing, could you answer? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think in my mind it just boils down to people, right? If you ask these financiers, why are you not funding homegrown brands versus others, they will say that the quality of entrepreneurs is not the same. So it's much easier to make a bet on someone like Google than to make a bet on a local search engine. So I think it boils down to people. There is a brain drain that's happened from these markets. And our education system is not necessarily encouraging the right type of skill development as well. So I think it's starting to change. And like I said in the beginning as well, the emergence of Dubai as a hub for talent is going to start changing that. I think a lot of world-class talent from all over the world that has affinity to the region is starting to move to Dubai. And I think this will then give the investors and the financiers the confidence that the businesses that are started by this talent can become successful and can become global.
Great. And I think the more we see success stories, I think that also builds the confidence for the investors that, okay, I don't have to just go for the Google and the Microsoft, so forth. We have a Kareem or we have a, Capsters and et cetera. So Okay, any other questions? Jonathan, or Bilal? Right there.
My turn?
Yeah, the gentleman. Could you stand up, please? Bilal?
I got the mic now.
Okay, he had raised a hand first, so.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Sorry. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Bilal. I have a question, which is, what defines something as being global and/or Islamic and/or halal from a brand perspective? So, for example, if you're Uniqlo and you sell hijabs, do you fall into that category? Or if, for example, you are Google and you have a Ramadan page, does that make you Islamic or halal? Or if you're Dave Chappelle and you're a Muslim comedian, or Muhammad Ali, or if you convert to Islam and you're the CEO of a massive company, or if you're Emirates Airlines, or if you're Yusuf Islam, just wanted to know if any of those things fall into the category of global and/or Islamic and/or halal. Thank you.
I have a perspective. That's my dear friend Bilal Jonathan Wilson, who himself, by the way, is a halal branding expert. So his question is very layered and specific. But would any of you would like to comment on that, or your perspective of? I think that's a very fair and good question.
Yeah, that's also the question that I had being invited for this panel. Am I halal? Well, is my brand, is Capsters halal? Because halal is, we discussed this earlier when we prepared this panel as well, it's usually referred to as food. And to be honest, with hijabs, as you see in this room, but worldwide, there's different interpretations. So what is right and what is wrong? And what I tried to do when I graduated is that I went to an imam in Amsterdam asking what he thought of my designs. And he embraced them and actually asked him if I could solve the solution of swimming for Muslim girls in Amsterdam. We actually try to stay away from the term Islam in our branding or in our communication. But now actually we embrace the word hijab. In the beginning we tried to reach a bigger audience because to be honest there's more cultures covering themselves as women. And also there's women with hair loss that showed interest in our product, wearing our Capsters design, for example, after curing from cancer. Now we embrace the term hijab because of the findability, how do you say it, the search engines. So in that sense, now we embrace our background and how we started. But I found it very hard to answer your question because I don't think there's a straight answer.
Sure. If I can take a stab at it based on our work in this space, if you look at Islamic banking, right, it is a sector, finance is a sector where its core product is affected by Islamic values. Very clearly, there are clear injunctions, there's very clear lines that cannot be crossed in terms of financing. So when you look at Islamic banks today and you see the example of what's happening with Noor Bank, and you're seeing the evolution of Islamic banks now moving towards ethical or social financing, also getting involved with the ESG, environment, socially responsible funds, so forth. So I see what's happening in Islamic finance as an answer to where that possibly is, which is that if we're talking about global brand, so global brands, we're talking about products and services, in most cases consumer facing. So those are brands, I would say, that espouse an underlying Islamic principle, but it positioned for a global universal appeal within those realms of the offering. Today in Malaysia, 80%, even though 80% plus of their Islamic banking customers are non-Muslim, because they like the offering, they like the proposition it has. So similarly, if we apply to the food sector now, underlying core principles of Islamic values being how it is the animal is to be treated, and I would not even start with the slaughter part, right? I would start with how the animal is treated, how it's taken care of, how it's slaughtered, how it's distributed, etc., and also that aspect. A brand that lives by those boundaries and becomes globally, universally appealable would be how I would answer that question. And I think similar definition would then similar approach would cross over to modest fashion in a way. There are sectors that it doesn't apply. You cannot have a global Islamic tire manufacturing brand, because it just doesn't, because the core product is not affected. But when it comes to these core sectors that are being covered by this event, those are sectors where the core products are affected by Islamic values. So that would be sort of my perspective.
Maybe if the tiles are designed with Islamic patterns.
No, but that's the thing is, that's why the understanding the underlying guidelines and the scholarship is important, because the Prophet ﷺ didn't say put the Islamic pattern, and that's not in the, so that's just a cultural
No, I think what's important is also values and integrity, and that's what I hear throughout the conference.
And I think this is something we're starting to see. A lot of brands, even in the travel sphere. We have the example of Shahzad Hotel, which was on my panel yesterday. It is a premium quality hotel that is a dry hotel. It offers, space for women separate and men, for families to have good environment, and it's a 5-star facility. They don't brand themselves. They don't have to wear it on their sleeves, so to say that it's Islamic. But it is certainly what we would call the Muslim or halal travel space activity. So absolutely, I think the word values is the key driver to it. All right, I think we still have time for at least a couple more questions. Anyone else? Yes, sir, sorry.
This question, my name is Farooq Qasim, serial entrepreneur based in Dubai. This question is addressed to the co-founder of Careem. I just want to know, being a homegrown brand, do you have any challenges from the authorities wherever you operate, especially like places like Dubai, the RTA? Do they give you trouble or give you any challenges that you need to address?
So this is a live topic. So I think the general approach that we have taken in almost all of our markets is to not disrupt, but enable. And that's the reality of the region that we live in. So our approach has been that let's go to the regulators, go to the relevant government agencies, and offer a partnership and collaborate with them. And it's been the same with the RTA as well. We've gone to them multiple times, and we've offered them our support, our technology, in order to improve the provisioning of services in Dubai. So, I think there have been developments which unfortunately I cannot share in this public forum, but the approach in general is to work together with the government to make things better for the people of Dubai.
Great question, thank you. I'll take another question. Yes, Amani, right here in the front.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Dr. Diana Khalil. I have a brand, a modest fashion brand called Abaya Addict. We're based out of Dubai and we sell worldwide. I just wanted to ask, what effect do you feel that the media has in shaping our brands? The word Islamic and Muslim now is kind of a word that brings a lot of stigma, that people are ashamed of being Muslims in some part of the world because they can't break away from the way that the media portrays them. Now, in my industry, for instance, in the Islamic fashion industry, I'm noticing that the media's portrayal of Muslim women is starting to change, and therefore people are starting to accept the term modest fashion. And you see big brands like H&M now, showing a Muslim woman in their campaign, or you see big brands now starting to, like Valentino, offer long-sleeved clothing and try to, appease to the Muslim consumer. So, what do you feel will have to happen in order for a big Muslim brand to emerge? Do you feel that media plays a big role in this?
I can take a stab at this. I think the media is, of course, important. You cannot ignore the media. But I think it also, we have to define who we are going after, right? And if you're going after, let's say, Muslims, then the brand stigma does not exist per se, right? So I think in that segment you're fine, and you might even build an affinity in that segment by being called Islamic or a Muslim brand. But if the ambition is to go beyond that segment and become more mass in some of the other markets, then there needs to be a more neutral positioning to make sure that the stigma that's attached to the term is not taken with you. So I'm sure the media can play a big role, but I think it's probably important to be very careful in your own positioning. If the ambition is to focus, this segment and this segment alone, then you're probably fine. But if the ambition is to go broader and become more mass in other segments as well, then from the very beginning, there is probably a need to be neutral.
I think the secret is that there's money in this market. And that is actually why I'm very glad that you published this report, because that is what I think the media will change its perception. From a personal perspective, I've been dealing with the press for 16 years. And they approached me as a designer, asking me for colors and materials. But what I actually felt my duty was, while hearing all these stories during the research of all these women, is by not saying what they're not, but by just showing these cases of what they are. So I published a book of my research called Hoofddoeken in Dutch, which is hijabs in international. And we organized a traveling exhibition. And I organized it locally with different women every time, putting them on stage, showcasing them as individuals, not as a homogeneous group of veiled women. And I think that's the power that Shirsan Global is doing as well. They're actually approaching media with different stories, with role models, with showcasing the stories that the media doesn't pick up by themselves. So I think that's part of the answer.
So I think it's a great question to conclude with. It is a fact demographically that the Muslims worldwide are today the youngest population in the world across the globe, wherever they are there, either as minorities or within the populations, the Arab Spring. Everything is a reflection of the young population. Some of the Islamic countries are now the fastest growing economies, from Indonesia, Turkey to the GCC, Malaysia, etc. So in many ways, what you're seeing, the transformation, is also a reflection of empowerment that Muslims as consumers are showing. And I think the more that happens, it will be acceptable. And to Mudassir's point, I think you have to also be inclusive and realize we're part of a global, we're part of the global, we live as global citizens. So, ensuring that inclusivity is there. And of course, we're supposed to be, as Allah said in the Quran, we're supposed to be best examples for mankind. So why shouldn't our products and services be best examples? So we've seen this with this event. We've seen this with the word halal and modest fashion. This change, even the past 3 years, has been tremendous. And I think as both the consumers demanded, as long as I think the consumer demand is there, it will continue to be more and more accepted. So I'd like to, with that, conclude and thank everyone for your questions, and especially the panelists. I think that was a wonderful conversation. Please.